From the moment the first notes of the massed bands echoed across Horse Guards Parade, an unseen tension threaded its way through the ceremony. It was the annual Trooping the Color, tradition incarnate, scarlet-coated soldiers, gleaming swords, and the pageantry of a monarchy whose rituals stretch back centuries. Yet this year, beneath the fanfare, a quiet revolution was unfolding. King Charles III, his health an open secret since the announcement of his cancer diagnosis, chose not to mount his gray charger as his mother once did. Instead, he settled into the plush interior of a carriage, an Ascot landau, armored by protocol yet fragile in appearance. His scarlet tunic, normally immaculate, seemed to struggle against the weight of expectation. Each measured breath he drew was a testament to duty. Despite illness, he would lead this parade. But then, as the carriage doors opened, all eyes shifted. Where Queen Camilla or Prince William would traditionally ride at Charles's right hand, there stood Catherine, Princess of Wales, her posture poised, her expression serene. The cheers that erupted were not for the king's resilience, but for the woman now central to the monarchy's future. In that instant, the monarchy whispered its readiness to evolve. To appreciate the magnitude of this shift, consider the symbolism of Trooping the Color. Dating to 1748, it was originally a military exercise, the King's Guard displaying their regimental flag so that soldiers could recognize it on the battlefield. Over time, it transformed into a statement of unity between monarch and people. Every alignment on the Buckingham Palace balcony is a message: who stands next to the sovereign, who follows behind, who is absent. This choreography speaks louder than any royal proclamation. As the massed bands marched past, the Herculean drums beating a steady rhythm, footage captured Camilla on the flank, quiet, composed, but unmistakably displaced. Her powder blue ensemble, chosen to blend with the spring sky, contrasted starkly with Catherine's vibrant cornflower blue. When the princess raised her hand in a graceful wave, the public's response was thunderous. When Camilla offered her own salute, the applause felt muted, as if concerned it might break her composure. Watching the scene unfold, palace insiders noted that Camilla's composure began to crack even before the main parade. In the hours leading up to the ceremony, aides saw her linger in hallways, hands clasped as if steadying herself against an unseen gale. She asked about minor details, whether the horses for Catherine's coach were properly rested, whether the children's hats were secure, but these questions, normally routine, took on a new urgency. It was as though she sought control in a moment slipping beyond her grasp. Until that carriage rolled forward, this had been Camilla's domain. Since her investiture as queen consort, she had fought, quietly but fiercely, for validation. Headlines chronicled her tireless charity work, her discreet philanthropy, her willingness to embrace tradition. Yet for many, she remained an interloper, an outsider who had wed the heir only after navigating the ghosts of Diana and decades of public skepticism. Then came the Carriage Assignments, a signal even more potent than the balcony lineup. The glass state coach, its panels of gleaming crystal and ornate gold, had long been reserved for the monarch alone, and occasionally for the Princess of Wales. This year it bore Catherine and her children, striding down the mall in a tableau of youthful grace and promise. Camilla's carriage, the Ascot landau, followed, its open top exposing her to the elements, but excluding her from the stage. For palace watchers, the implications were immediate. Status is sight. In the monarchy, carriage choice equates to hierarchy. A coach with enclosed walls confers protection and prominence. An open carriage signals accessibility, but vulnerability. By placing Catherine in the state coach, Charles conferred upon her the mantle of continuity. By relegating Camilla to a secondary vehicle, he signaled a recalibration of trust. Yet the greatest drama remained off-camera. As the coaches swept past cheering crowds, Camilla was said to have retreated afterward to a private sitting room. There, unseen by public view, she wept, not in bitterness, but in the quiet sorrow of someone who had given everything for a place beside the sovereign, only to feel the ground shift beneath her feet. Her tears were not for herself, but for a role she had painstakingly built and now saw evolving into someone else's hands. Meanwhile, Catherine's journey to that carriage had been shaped by a series of pivotal moments. Cameras flashed back to the princess's return to public life just months prior. After a discreet treatment for illness, she re-emerged at the Chelsea Flower Show, waving weakly to supporters, her smile an act of defiance against speculation. That single appearance, her willingness to be seen, vulnerable, rekindled public affection in a way no staged engagement ever could. She followed with quieter triumphs, a visit to a London children's hospital where she cradled a newborn in her arms, a video message for mental health awareness, infused with empathy rather than ceremony, a serene appearance at Wimbledon, where she clapped beside the Duchess of Edinburgh, her presence almost familial. Each moment endeared her more deeply to a populace craving authenticity. Yet at Trooping, authenticity merged with symbolism. When Catherine's eyes met her father-in-law's across the parade square, the meaning was undeniable, an unspoken transfer of confidence. The world watched as Charles leaned in, murmured a few words, and placed a protective hand on her shoulder, a gesture caught in close-up by broadcasters. In that intimacy on a public stage lay the crux of power, trust. As afternoon light faded, the royal party reassembled on the balcony for its famed photo op. The Great War Memorial guns boomed their salute, and flags fluttered overhead. There, Catherine stood directly to Charles's right, traditionally the heir's spot. William joined from her left, a composed figure in uniform, his glance shifting between his father and wife. Camilla, positioned behind, looked on with a quiet smile, but those who know the palace's language read the silent message, a subtle demotion in favor of preparing the next generation. To grasp the full weight of this realignment, look to the balcony's history. In 1952, the newly crowned Queen Elizabeth II faced her first trooping alone, her husband Philip by her side, and children yet to be born. In 2003, Diana's absence was keenly felt as William and Harry stood alongside their mother. Each lineup has mirrored the monarchy's evolving priorities. This year's tableau spoke of renewal, of a dynasty seeking both heritage and relevance. Behind these public displays, aides worked tirelessly. Palace planners tweaked protocols, diplomats reviewed guest lists, security assessed routes. Yet the human drama outshone any logistical feat. Camilla's private anguish contrasted sharply with Catherine's public embrace. There was no overt conflict, no raised voices or whispered feuds caught on wiretap, but the undercurrents roiled like tides unseen. One former courtier, speaking anonymously, summarized it best: "The monarchy is about service, but it's also about symbolism. When you adjust who stands where, you're adjusting the story you tell the world." Charles made his choice. Now everyone else must adapt. As dusk settled over Buckingham Palace and the last strains of music faded, a new chapter had begun. The carriage wheels rolled back through private gates, leaving behind a plaza still buzzing with awe. For the public, it was a spectacle, royalty at its finest. For those within the palace walls, it was something more profound, a deliberate pivot toward the future. In that carriage, Catherine's hand rested lightly on the coach rail, her gaze forward. In the private room beyond closed doors, Camilla's tears made no headlines. And in the sturdy boots of the King's Guard, the weight of tradition met the promise of change. This was not scandal. It was succession in motion, a palace whisper made manifest. And it set the stage for questions that would echo long after the flags were lowered. How will Camilla redefine her role? Will Catherine's prominence endure once her father's health declines further? And what will become of a monarchy learning to balance reverence for the past with the demands of a restless present? Tonight, the answer remains unwritten. But if Trooping the Color 2025 proved anything, it is that power is never static, especially when held in the hands of those who choose to share it. As morning light faded into afternoon glow, the palace's corridors thrummed with renewed purpose. In private sitting rooms, aides huddled over seating charts and talking points. In the royal nurseries, nannies replayed photographs of Catherine's carriage wave, marveling at how the children's smiles seemed to illuminate the entire mall. And in a quiet antechamber off the throne room, Camilla composed herself for the next public appearance, an investiture in the Garter Room, her expression a mask of calm resolve. Meanwhile, Catherine slipped from the glass state coach into an awaiting cluster of photographers, her children trailing behind like little ambassadors. Each click of the shutter captured more than images. It immortalized a moment when the institution signaled its intent. By her side was the king, supporting her with a steady arm, his presence as protective as the shield he once bore on the battlefield. Their steps echoed in the painted vaults, each footfall reinforcing the silent pact between past and future. Inside the palace, the king's message had already traveled far. Foreign dignitaries, present for the parade, privately congratulated over tea. The princess was exquisite, or, more pointedly, a shrewd move by His Majesty. European royals compared notes. Some lamented the inevitable passage of the torch, others admired the foresight. Journalists scrambled to add context, historians explaining that monarchy always evolves by subtle gestures, commentators noting that popularity alone cannot sustain a throne without institutional blessing. Back on the mall, local vendors counted their takings, amused that souvenir T-shirts with Catherine's likeness outpaced the king's by 3-1. Social media analytics teams tweeted pie charts. Catherine mentions versus Camilla mentions, for :1. Hashtags like #NextQueen and #Kate2025 outpaced even #trooping. For the palace's communications office, it was both a triumph and a puzzle. How to harness this surge without sidelining long-standing supporters of a queen consort. Later that afternoon, Catherine addressed the assembled honorees in the Buckingham Palace ballroom, her voice measured and warm. She spoke of service learned in hospital corridors, visits where a child's laughter banished her own fears, and of the strength found in community, echoing values her father so often championed. Reporters noted the ease with which she bridged the formal and the personal. Passages that could have sounded rote felt lived, passages soaked in empathy. In those moments, she wasn't merely fulfilling a role, she was defining it. Camilla, by contrast, presided over a smaller gathering in the Garter Room, bestowing knighthoods on long-serving aides. She delivered a gracious speech on loyalty and steadfastness, her words echoing themes she has championed for years. Yet the galleries sensed a subtle difference. Where Catherine's presence felt like an open invitation, Camilla's gathering retained an aura of guarded tradition. Guests later admitted they left with admiration for her poise, but also with an unspoken question. Was this role now secondary to the larger narrative unfolding downstairs? As dusk approached, the king prepared for an official dinner in the state dining room, seating Catherine to his right and Camilla across the table. The menu, filet of beef Wellington followed by syllabub, could not mask the shift in atmosphere. During the dinner's toasts, Charles praised his daughter-in-law's grace under pressure and her inspiring example to the next generation, then raised his glass to the continuity of this cherished institution. Camilla's acknowledgement was restrained yet dignified, but guests noted Catherine's radiant smile outshone every crystal chandelier. Outside, the palace gates closed on another packed day. The public retreated, conversations buzzing about what they had witnessed. Taxi drivers debated whether the monarchy was truly modernizing or merely staging a clever photo op. Tea rooms across London replayed evening news segments, some titled "Princess Becomes Centerpiece," others "Queen Consort Adapts to New Role." Inside, Catherine returned to her private apartments, where portraits of her family lined the walls. She paused before one of George, Charlotte, and Louis, recalling how those children had watched her ride by, their little hands waving with unfiltered joy. She allowed herself a moment's rest, aware that tomorrow would bring rehearsals for the upcoming state visit to Canada, a trip she would now lead in the king's stead. The weight of that responsibility was real, but as she lifted her chin, strength returned. She had stepped into a carriage. Now, she would step onto the stage of global diplomacy. Camilla, in her own chambers, unpacked the day in a leather-bound journal. Her handwriting, steady but deliberate, traced reflections on loyalty, on the nature of service, and on the honor of having once held the spotlight. She jotted a line borrowed from her coronation vow: to be a comfort, to be a solace. Then, in a flourish of ink, she wrote, "Time teaches us when to step forward and when to yield." By night's end, palace records showed no alterations to official precedents. Camilla retained her title, Catherine her place in the line of succession. Yet beneath the formal ledger lay a new reality, a monarchy in transition, its heartbeat measured not by tradition alone but by an evolving bond between sovereign and people. The king's carriage had carried more than flesh and bone, it had carried a message. And though no fanfare announced it, the future's shape was drawn in every subtle shift, from carriage to carriage, from balcony to ballroom, from heart to heart. The next morning, as dawn painted the sky rose and saffron, palace staff prepared for the Canada tour. There, in a land known for polite candor, Catherine would meet crowds still bruised by the pandemic's toll. She would stand before First Nations leaders, speak at veterans' memorials, and visit schools rebuilding after wildfire seasons. Her presence, now officially endorsed by the king's gesture, would be tested on the world stage. And through it all, Camilla would watch, ready to adapt and to serve where she could. History may have lent its favor to Catherine's carriage, but duty calls each royal in its own time. For now, the echoes of trooping the color linger as a promise that in the turning of centuries, the crown endures by embracing both continuity and change. And so, as the last echoes of trumpets fade and the palace gates close on another day of history in motion, one truth remains clear. A monarchy built on centuries of tradition must also embrace the pulse of change. We've witnessed a king's quiet statement of trust, a princess stepping into the spotlight with poise and purpose, and a consort grappling with the bittersweet reality of a world moving forward. What happens next is anyone's guess. Will Camilla find a renewed role in service? Can Catherine carry the crown's spirit into a new era? And how will King Charles's gesture at trooping the color resonate in years to come? The intrigue isn't over, it's only just beginning. If this journey behind the pomp and protocol spoke to you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Which moment struck you most? And who do you believe will define the monarchy's next chapter? Join the conversation, and let's explore the next royal revelation together.